After Walking with Beasts came out in 2001, the Walking with series kinda died for a bit. Except it didn't. From 2002 to 2003, the Walking with series took a break from its main trilogy to produce 2 spin-offs, Chased by Dinosaurs and Chased by Sea Monsters. 2 series that drastically changed the Walking with series. Instead of being a Planet Earth style, rather nice and calm documentary series, the Walking with series has been transformed into this bombastic and wild crocodile hunter-esque show with dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures. This complete change in style meant one thing for the final installment in the main Walking with trilogy. Was it going to be this crazy, energetic show, or was it going to be laid back and chill? The answer to that is yes. Released in 2005, the third and final installment to the main Walking with trilogy was completed with Walking with Monsters, the prequel series that looked at how life first evolved and took us all the way to the very beginning of the Age of Dinosaurs. Walking with Monsters is without a doubt the most ambitious of the Walking with trilogy. Walking with Dinosaurs and Walking with Beasts are both tough acts to follow. Not only do both of them have a set-in-stone pattern, but they also showcase some of the most iconic prehistoric creatures to have ever lived. Monsters has neither of these, not only having a style that is entirely different from its predecessors, but the time that it's set in only really has a handful of really iconic and well-known animals, whereas the former two have dozens of animals to pick from. So Walking with Monsters better have a lot of tricks up its sleeve to keep itself right up there with its prequels. And did Walking with Monsters do that? Well, yes and no. While I do consider Monsters to be the weakest in the trilogy, it's the weakest in a trilogy that is really good. Monsters keeps a lot of the core aspects of the previous 2 installments intact and well polished. The entire style of the show still feels like it could fit within the Walking with series, even if it does have quite a few changes from Dinosaurs and Beasts. And on the topic of those changes, they're really cool. Starting off with the very beginning, we have the number of episodes being chopped in half from 6 to 3. A pretty significant change from the rest of the shows, and each episode has about 2 to 3 segments. But despite the reduction of time and increase in segments, each episode still feels fairly well paced. None of them overstay their welcome, and they showcase what they need to do down to a T. And for whenever you want to get to the next segment, the show incorporates sequences of animals evolving into the next animal. Visually, they look friggin' awesome, with the colors of the previous animal and the future animal flashing all over each other, and each model slowly transforming into each other. It's never boring to watch, and it's one of my favorite parts of the show. Another change that is added to each segment is the inclusion of stats for each time, including time, place, oxygen levels, temperature, threats, etc. These don't really have a whole lot to them other than just being something that's flashy and cool at the beginning, but otherwise it's still neat. The new things aren't the only additions that this show has. With the gap between Walking with Dinosaurs and this show, the CGI has become even better. A lot of the animals really look great in their CG forms. Long gone are the days of dumpy-looking tyrannosaurs, replaced by sleek and smooth mammal-like reptiles and terrifying arthropods. But this series still stays true to its origins by having plenty of practical effects, each of them being as good as they've always been. Most of them are relegated to scenes which showcase features of the animals that we would feature in the future, like different kinds of teeth, touch sensors, etc. Every animal in this show is also really cool. As stated earlier, most of the animals in this show are completely new to a lot of people, and for many of these guys it's their first time being in a documentary like this. Some of the new guys include Anomalocaris, an arthropod ancestor that can only really be described as a vampire rug, Hyneria, a giant fish that can haul herself onto dry land like an orca hunting a seal, and the Gorgonopsid, a strange saber-toothed mix between reptiles and mammals. They also have some of my favorite designs in the entire series. Everything from the coloring to the movements to the sound that these guys make are all really quite fantastic, and the Gorgonopsid is one of my favorite creatures in the show. As for the iconic pre-dinosaur animals, you've got Dimetrodon, Trilobite, the giant bugs, and my favorite things ever.
Meet Brontoscorpio.
I love sea scorpions. These guys don't really get a whole lot of screen time, being relegated to background characters in the second segment, but regardless, they steal the show whenever they're on screen. Basically what I'm getting at is, dude, these scorpions kick ass! Look at them smack these fish so they can eat them! Holy frig! I think the show has a really great mix of old and new creatures, none of them getting too much screen time over each other, and thus making it very interesting. As for each episode and the segments within them, they're too short to talk about in depth, so I'll keep it brief. Episode 1, Water Dwellers, features the origins of life itself, literally starting with the creation of our world. Starting off each segment, we have the Cambrian, which features some of the earliest multi-celled life that began filling the seas. including the previously mentioned trilobites and anomalocaris, and hycubichthyes, the first ever fish and vertebrate, even having a little tiny backbone. The second segment is about the armored fish Cephalaspis, as they dodge arachnid Jesus to get to their spawning grounds. This segment is one of my personal favorites because it's the most Walking with Dinosaurs-esque, with a more calm atmosphere and having quite a few scenes that focus on the world. The third segment has the amphibian Hynerpeton, and insert musical number here. One day a Hynerpeton came from the lake to make some babies, but then a Hyneria came from the water and she did eat him. Now he is dead and, no, that's pretty much it. Hynerpeton, he never got to make babies. Honestly though, I really don't like the Hynerpeton that much. Not because our model is bad or anything, it actually looks really good and I like the color patterning, but because they never shut up. After a while, it just gets kind of annoying, so it's kind of cathartic to see the Hyneria finally eat these guys. As this segment and this episode close out, we get a preview of the next episode with a bunch of baby lizards hatching from eggs that evolved from Hynerpeton eggs, and a spider comes along to absolutely murder them. Alright, cool, it's nice to see that the baby murder from Walking with Beasts carried over into the show. This segues into episode 2, Reptiles Beginnings, where, ironically enough, we follow the spider as she tries to find a new home. This segment showcases all the big buggy boys in all of their glory, including the human head-sized spider Mesothele, which, fun fact, wasn't actually a big spider. You see, Mesothele, as we call her in the documentary, was actually based off of Megarachniae, a creature that was previously known as a spider but is now known as a god among men, the eagle-sized dragonfly Meganera, and the car-sized millipede Arthopleura. But this episode is called Reptiles Beginnings, so there should be a reptile, right? Well, there is, in the form of a Petrolachosaurus, a little green lizard that gets clapped by the Mesothele, and who also evolves into the sailback Adaposaurus, kicking off the Permian portions. And of course, since I mentioned sailbacks and the Permian, we're gonna have to bring up Dimetrodon, who is pretty rad. Her model is great, I like the colors. And that's basically all the praise because she kinda sucks. First of all, they try to pull a Postosuchus with her and make her tragic, by having her look after her eggs for 7 months throughout the winter. But whereas the longer runtime helped us see the Postosuchus fall from her top spot via competition and injuries, Dimetrodon is really just tired? It doesn't work is what I'm trying to say. Also, I think this segment is really fast paced. Going back to the Postosuchus, we got about 10 minutes of screen time for her, showcasing her fall as well as her being a pretty rad dude. Dimetrodon's hardships are over in half that time. It's not really enough is what I'm trying to say. But anyways, the Dimetrodon then evolves into the Gorgonopsid as a segue into episode 3. Clash of Titans. Starting off this episode, we have a Permian section that showcases the biggest mass extinction ever, which had over 90% of all life on Earth just die. And you kind of feel it throughout this segment. Unlike the Walking with Dinosaurs episode that talked about the same issue, the Permian segment has all the animals living in a rather large expanse of nothingness, other than some food in a tiny little pond. And it's only once the pond is gone does the drought really come into play, and many of the animals die as a result. Some of the creatures in this episode include the previously mentioned Gorgonopsid, a turtle relative called Scutosaurus, a type of amphibian called a Labyrinthodont, and Diectodon, a little creature who is like a little Placerius from Walking with Dinosaurs. And it is these guys that turn into the final creatures of the show, Lystrosaurus. The last segment has these guys going on a migration to search for more food because there are just so many of these dudes. Like half of all life on Earth at the time were just these guys. That's not an exaggeration either. In fact, Lystrosaurus was one of the few creatures that proved the idea of continental drift, and to prove that the Earth was also a giant landmass. What I'm getting at is, Lystrosaurus is really important. This segment is also pretty cool, with the Lystrosaurus having to dodge dangers like the venomous Therocephalian and the crocodile-like Chasmatosaurus. But the one creature that makes this segment truly worth it is Euparkeria, a little lizard that can run on its hind legs because its hips are placed differently on his body than other lizards. This leads to him evolving into the dinosaurs, all accompanied with the triumphant Walking with Dinosaurs score and scenes from Time of the Titans playing over the credits. which is a pretty fair place to end Walking with Monsters. Overall, while it is the weakest in the trilogy, it's still pretty solid. Monsters may not have the strength of its predecessors, but overall, it's still a pretty solid documentary series, with just enough things being changed up to make this series stand out from the rest of its peers. If you haven't seen it, I'll totally recommend Walking with Monsters to you, and I'm gonna give this show a 6 out of 10. And that wraps up the main Walking With trilogy. So now, this is where the fun begins. But until then, what did you guys think of Walking with Monsters? Did you think it was good, trash, or somewhere in between? Either way, I am Sam the Giganfan, reminding you to wash your hands, and that this was the war between monsters.